Welcome to a new video, and today I'm gonna talk about the 22nd SS-Freiwilligen-Kavallerie-Division. The 22nd SS Division was established in May 1944 near Kispa in Hungary. The 17th Cavalry Regiment formed the core of the division. Most of the soldiers were folk Germans who were originally members of the Hungarian armed forces but were transferred to the waffen-SS due to a treaty between Nazi Germany and the Hungarian government. Because of the cause of the war, which was not at all positive for the Germans, there was no waiting until the division was at full strength to send into battle. In September 1944, from the combat-ready units of the 22nd SS Cavalry, a Kampfgruppe was formed from the SS Cavalry Regiment 52 and some supporting units. Commanded by SS Hauptsturmführer Toni Amaise, the Kampfgruppe was sent to the front line in Romania. There the Kampfgruppe was to join the 17th Armored Corps, but failed to do so. The division then fought alongside the Hungarian troops. The Red Army's advance first caused the Kampfgruppe to be surrounded on October 2, 1944, and then split into two. One part was led by SS Hauptsturmführer Harry van Dieken and managed to reach the Harmas and swim across it. Then they reached the German lines on the other side of the river. The other part of the Kampfgruppe was still led by Amaise, but could not reach the Harmas, and they had to survive behind the Red Army lines. They succeeded in this, and on October the 30th reached the lines of the German army south of Budapest. The other parts of the division, now just coming out of training, were immediately sent to Budapest to protect the city from the advancing Red Army. Since this division fought almost exclusively in Budapest, I will now tell a bit about the Battle of Budapest and how it went for the division. The Red Army started its offensive against the city on October 29, 1944. More than 1 million men, split into two operating maneuver groups, advanced. The plan was to isolate Budapest from the rest of the German and Hungarian forces. On 7 November 1944, Soviet and Romanian troops entered the eastern suburbs, 20 kilometers from the Old Town. The Red Army, after a much-needed pause in operations, resumed its offensive on the 19th of December. The 26th of December, a road linking Budapest to Vienna was seized by the Soviet troops, thereby completing the encirclement. As a result of the Soviet link-up, nearly 33,000 German and 37,000 Hungarian soldiers, as well as over 800,000 civilians, became trapped within the city. Refusing to authorize a withdrawal, Adolf Hitler had declared Budapest a fortress city, which was to be defended to the last man. Waffen-SS General Karl Pfeffer-Wildenburg, the commander of the 9th Waffen-SS Alpine Corps, was put in charge of the city's defenses. The Soviet offensive began in the eastern suburbs, advancing through Pest, making good use of the large central avenues to speed up their progress. The German and Hungarian defenders, overwhelmed, tried to trade space for time to slow down the Soviet advance. They ultimately withdraw to shorten their lines, hoping to take advantage of the hilly nature of Buda. In January 1945, the Germans launched a three-part counteroffensive, codenamed Operation Conrad. This was a joint German-Hungarian effort to relieve the encircled garrisons at Budapest. Operation Conrad was launched on the 1st of January. The German 4th SS Panzer Corps attacked from Tata through hilly terrain northwest of Budapest in an effort to break the siege. On the 3rd of January, the Soviet command sent 4 more divisions to meet this threat, and recalled the Romanian divisions on the 15th of January because of their inefficiency. This Soviet action stopped the offensive near Biszke, less than 20 kilometers west of Budapest. The Germans were forced to withdraw on the 12th of January. They then launched Operation Conrad II on the 7th of January. The 4th SS Panzer Corps attacked from Esztergom toward Budapest airport to capture it and improve the ability to supply the city by air. This offensive was halted near the airport. Street fighting in Budapest increased in intensity. Supply became a decisive factor because of the loss of Várhelyi airport on the 27th of December 1944, just before the start of the siege. Until the 9th of January 1945, the German troops were able to use some of the main avenues as well as the park next to Buda Castle as landing zones for aircraft and gliders, although they were under constant artillery fire from the Soviets. Before the Danube froze, some supplies could be sent on barges under cover of darkness and fog. Food shortages were more and more common, and soldiers had to rely on finding their own sources of sustenance, some even resorting to eating their own horses. The extreme temperatures also affected the German and Hungarian troops. Soviet troops quickly found themselves in the same situation as the Germans had in Stalingrad. They were able to take advantage of the urban terrain by relying heavily on snipers and sappers to advance. Fighting broke out in the sewers as both sides used them for troop movements. 6 Soviet Marines even managed to get to the Castle Hill and capture a German officer before returning to their own lines. Such feats were rare because of ambushes in the sewers set up by the Axis troops using the local inhabitants as guides. In mid-January, Chespol Island was taken along with its military factories, which were still producing Panzerfaust and shells even under Soviet fire. Meanwhile in Pest, the situation for the Axis forces deteriorated, with the garrison facing the risk of being cut in half by the advancing Soviet troops. On the 17th of January 1945, Hitler agreed to withdraw the remaining troops from Pest to try to defend Buda. German troops destroyed the bridges on the 18th of January, despite protests from the Hungarian officers. One of them was the famous Chain Bridge, dating from 1849. On the 18th of January 1945, the 4th SS Panzer Corps, whose relocation to the region northeast of Lake Balaton had been completed on the previous day, was again thrown into battle. This was Operation Conrad III. In 2 days, the German tanks reached the Danube, tearing the Soviet Transdanubian front apart, and by the 26th of January, the offensive had reached a point roughly 25 kilometers from the ring around the capital. Stalin ordered his troops to hold their ground at all costs, and 2 army corps that were dispatched to assault Budapest were hastily moved to the south of the city to counter the German offensive. German troops got less than 20 kilometers from the city but were unable to maintain their impetus due to fatigue and supply problems. Budapest defenders asked permission to leave the city and escape the encirclement. Hitler refused. German troops could no longer hold their ground. They were forced to withdraw on the 28th of January 1945 and had to abandon much of the occupied territory. The fate of the defenders of Budapest was sealed. Unlike Pest, which was built on flat terrain, Buda was built on hills. This allowed the defenders to sight artillery and fortifications above the attackers, greatly slowing the Soviet advance. The main citadel, Gellert Hill, was defended by waffen-SS troops who successfully repelled several Soviet assaults. Nearby, Soviet and German forces were fighting for the city's cemetery among shell-opened tombs. It would last for several days. The fighting on the Margaret Island in the middle of the Danube was particularly merciless. The island was still attached to the rest of the city by the remaining half of the Margaret Bridge. It was used as a parachute drop zone as well as for covering improvised airstrips set up in the city center. The 25th Guards Rifle Division operated from the Soviet side in combat on the island. On the 11th of February 1945, Gellert Hill finally fell after 6 weeks of fighting, when the Soviets launched a heavy attack from 3 directions. Soviet artillery was able to dominate the entire city and to shell the remaining Axis defenders, who were concentrated in less than 2 square kilometers and suffering from malnutrition and disease. Despite the lack of supplies, the Axis troops refused to surrender and defend every street and house. By this time, some captured Hungarian soldiers defected and fought for the Soviet side. They were known collectively as the Volunteer Regiment of Buda. After capturing the southern railway station during a 2-day bloodbath, Soviet troops advanced to Castle Hill on the 10th of February. After a violent assault, Soviet Marines established a bridgehead on Castle Hill, while almost cutting the remaining garrison in half. Hitler still forbade the German commander Pfeffer-Wildenbruch to abandon Budapest or to attempt to break out. But glider flights bringing in supplies had ended a few days earlier and parachute drops also had been discontinued. In desperation, Pfeffer-Wildenbruch decided to lead the remnants of his troops out of Budapest. The German commander did not typically consult the Hungarian commander of the city. However, Pfeffer-Wildenbruch now uncharacteristically included Ivan Hindi in his last desperate breakout attempt. In the night of the 11th of February, some 28,000 German and Hungarian troops began to stream northwestward away from Castle Hill. They moved in 3 waves. Thousands of civilians were with each wave. Entire families pushing prams trudged through the snow and ice. Unfortunately for the would-be escapes, the Soviets awaited them in prepared positions around the Shell-Kalman-Ter area. The troops, along with the civilians, used heavy fog to their advantage. The first wave managed to surprise the waiting Soviet soldiers and artillery. The sheer numbers allowed many to escape. The second and third waves were less fortunate. Soviet artillery and rocket batteries bracketed the escape area, with deadly result that killed thousands. Despite heavy losses, 5,000 to 10,000 people managed to reach the wooded hills northwest of Budapest and escape towards Vienna, but only 600 to 700 Germans and Hungarian soldiers reached the main German lines from Budapest. The majority of the escapees were killed, wounded or captured by the Soviet troops. Pfeffer-Wildenbruch and Hindi were captured by waiting Soviet troops as they emerged from a tunnel running from the Castle district. Only 170 soldiers of the 22nd SS-Freiwilligen-Kavallerie-Division managed to escape from the encirclement. The survivors from Budapest were merged with the troops of Kampfgruppe Ameise to form the 37th SS-Freiwilligen-Kavallerie-Division Lützow. The remnants of the flak units were transferred to the 32nd SS-Freiwilligen-Grenadier Division. Even though there wasn't too much information about the 22nd SS Division in this video, I still hoped it was an interesting and informative video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and hope to see you in the next video.